Good morning, afternoon, and evening from wherever you are, and welcome to Nerd Tube and it's Dark Side of the Ring time. It's season 6. Forgot what episode this is. What is it? 4 or 5? 5 or 6?
Six.
I can tell you.
I think
Yeah,
it's
I want
in
to
the
say
title.
episode 6.
Six.
Yep.
I apologize. Episode 6. No, episode 5. Oh, episode 6. I was right.
Mhm.
Yeah, Dark Side of the Ring, episode 6. Hot stuff. Eddie Gilbert. Before we start talking about this episode, let's get a quick rundown of how each person felt about this episode. Starting with you, Jose.
This was more like a rise and fall episode of a wrestler rather than a dark side episode. I mean, you did get some dark elements toward the end of the episode, but I really wouldn't call it a dark side episode. But I enjoyed it. There was things about Eddie Gilbert that I never knew. Obviously, he was before my time. I think he was before all our time, really. But it's a case of what could have been had he stayed alive. You know, what would he have been like as a booker, even now in more modern times? You know, but we'll never know. But it was a good episode overall.
Cheats.
Yeah, I mean, I'd heard his name before and I heard the stories about him, but I honestly, like, sometimes I wouldn't even put the name to the story sometimes. Like, if you said Eddie Gilbert, I would have been like, oh, yeah, that's the guy with, Paul Heyman and Jim Cornette. But I just heard some of the ECW stories about him. I heard about the match between him and Cactus Jack. Like, I heard some of these stories here and there. I just didn't realize it was the same person until we were in this episode. So, like, I hate to say it, and I know that they say that he was like ahead of his time, maybe, but I'm more so like this is kind of like a C player. You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
tragic what happened to him, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, this is kind of like one of those filler episodes that they're kind of like, well, this guy had a really rough life and died early.
Yeah,
Like
that's basically what it was. It felt like, how could you really call it a dark side episode where it was like, it's more of the same thing that you've heard from like WWE, even where it's like, oh yeah, this guy died because of painkillers or whatever the fuck. So it was like, yeah, definitely a filler episode.
Yeah, I had no idea who the fuck Eddie Gilbert was. The funny thing is, there are things over the years of WWE that you've seen, also wrestling. I apologize that you think oh shit, that has to do with Eddie Gilbert, like Jerry Lawler getting run over.
Yep.
That was a Jerry, and the fact that he's associated with so many people, like Medusa and Cactus Jack, Mick Foley, like.
yeah, I didn't know he was married to Medusa. Or
That I did not know either. Yeah.
And I'm going to bring up something regarding a Sushi Onita, because we did that episode a while back where he got kicked in the face doing a hardcore wrestling match in Memphis or something, and it was a match that they brought up in this. And by the way, that revelation he got by getting kicked in the face by a fan made him realize, fans love the hardcore shit. And when he went back to Japan, he started a whole hardcore division. And Dark Side of the Ring actually did an episode of that.
Yeah,
that was,
FMW, I think, is what we covered.
Yeah. And
Yep.
anyway,
was that the porno? Was that the porno promotion?
Yeah,
no,
that was hardcore, all right. Yeah.
or the corno. Corno. I don't want to get us demonetized.
Anyway, so anytime you guys want to intervene, but don't jump ahead because I probably covered it.
All right.
Eddie Gilbert, a first in many things when it comes to the innovation of wrestling, from being a booker, which is a massive thing regarding this particular person, to shoot interviews. Eddie did it all before it became mainstream. Unfortunately for Eddie, he also became one of the first of a long, endless list of wrestlers to die way too young. Eddie Gilbert was born into wrestling, a journeyman as well. There wasn't an industry or territory he wasn't involved in, which is quite remarkable when you think about he was in fucking everybody's territory. This guy,
he went everywhere, everywhere.
Yeah. His brother talks deeply about Eddie. There's a 7-year age gap, which is similar to me and my brother. Dougie mentioned saying Eddie was ahead of his time as a booker. He was creative. He was creative in the ring. His father was a wrestler, Tommy Gilbert. but he never used his dad's name to get anywhere within the industry. He actually pretended to be a photographer, and at that particular time, he also became mates with a very young Jim Cornette.
Yeah,
you can see how young Jim Cornette looks back then. It's crazy seeing him.
and here's a fun fact. Here's a fun fact. Eddie Gilbert, Paul Heyman, and Jim Cornette all got their start in the business the same way, by taking pictures.
Being photographers.
Yep.
Yeah, because they mentioned that. Oops, my headphone just fallen off. They mentioned that later on regarding Paul Heyman when he was poorly dangerously.
Yeah.
So, all right. As Eddie got older, he tagged with his father Tommy and became the tag team champions. He wrestled in Tennessee wrestling, which is all about brawling. An infamous brawl that went outside the ring. Atsushi Onita, who was also in that brawl, as I mentioned earlier, got the idea for Hardcore Wrestling, FMW, when he was in that particular match. And that's also, as I said earlier, been in the Dark Side episode. That, by the way, that brawl was fucking amazing, by the way. Watching it again, like they took it to the outside and they smashed the living shit out of each other.
Yep.
And that's how Tennessee wrestling was back then. Back then, like people, they would hit you for real, just to sell it. It was all about brawling. So Gilbert then went on to work for the WWF, wrestling in Madison Square Garden. You can't really say no to that. He wasn't a big man wrestler. He wasn't a big man wrestler. He was more of like a high flying technician. Unfortunately, the series of his downfalls began when Eddie drove into the back of a truck, breaking his neck and almost crushing his heart at the age of 22 years old, which is incredible because it is usually, sorry, I'm looking for my headphone. It is usually something like that which kind of starts the downfall of particular wrestlers. 22 years old and he's having an injury like that. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. He got back into the ring.
Yeah, that could have done a normal person in, but yeah, for Eddie Gilbert, by the grace of God, he somehow made it through that. But unfortunately, like you said, this is where the downfall comes in because, you need pain pills to, keep going basically. And, it was like, it reminded me of Kurt Angle when Kurt Angle had neck surgery, when he had to be out for like 4 months in like 2003. And the only reason why he didn't take the year off is because he knew that he would lose the spot. And Eddie Gilbert went through that same thing of like, okay, fuck, if I'm hurt, that's going to not only affect me, but that's going to affect the guys that I'm in a storyline with. So I've got to get back so I can continue the angle and try to keep drawing money. And that was the mentality back then. It would not happen today. They would not allow this today.
No, yeah, but nowadays they give you a grandiose return.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Yeah, but yeah, Eddie got back into the ring within 3 months of breaking his fucking neck and having his heart crushed.
Like he really should have called it there. Like, I mean, I'm not saying he should have been like in the ring. I mean, like, be a booker, be someone backstage. And I know he's young, so I don't know how that would work. But I'm like, you're real. I know he's still trying to keep his spot, but I mean, like, I agree with you guys. I don't think he would have been cleared to wrestle today. Like, I don't think they would have, like, especially with this heart alone. To wrestle.
Yeah, with cardiac, they don't play with that. If it's like you've got heart issues, you are retiring. You do not get a say in it.
Anyway, he got back in the ring within 3 months, and he came back too quick. But he was worried about losing his spot. He broke his neck. His broken neck became an angle within the industry. With people always working on it and stuff like that. But then he fought a wrestler called the Masked Superstar, who happened to be a masked wrestler.
Yep.
And he did the neck breaker on him on the concrete on the outside. But unfortunately for Eddie, that did actually affect him.
Yeah.
And he was put out again. And this is what happens when you get injured too soon. Yes, Daniel. Too soon. Should have taken way more time to heal. I agree.
Yeah.
So this is where he meets Dr. George Zahorian, and this is the funny thing because Dr. George has also been brought up in Dark Side Wrestling in the past. Yeah.
You could do a whole episode just based on him, if not a two-parter, probably.
Yeah. There's some stories about Dr. Zahorian, that they could absolutely cover.
He was a doctor of the WWF who gave wrestlers anything they wanted, you know, and that's how it was.
I'm waiting
The
for him to
Doctor-
get inducted in the Hall of Fame. You know, like I mean, that's
His doctor's been exposed by the dark side in previous episodes. However, with getting acquainted with this guy, he kind of like the substance abuse. It kind of began for Eddie at this particular period. You about to watch it, mate?
All right. Well,
Okay,
if you're
well,
watching it, spoiler alert, I'd get out of here
Yeah.
because we're kind of spoiling it
No.
for you.
But before you get out, if you do get out of it to watch it, as we spoil it, make sure you subscribe.
Yeah.
We're the greatest YouTube channel you never heard of. So once again, Eddie returned from injury with the WWE landscape, but the WWE landscape had changed by then. You know, it became the land of the giants with Hogan and various other large muscular guys. And you can see that piss take in the way Darkseid was showing regarding large muscular guys. With that, there's one particular wrestler, I had no idea who he was, but he was fucking posing like this, and he was fucking, you know, flexing his pecs and shit like that.
Yeah, it was muscles on top of muscles. Tell me you're taking steroids without actually telling me you're taking steroids.
Yeah, I mean, this is the era when like the Bob Backlunds were being filtered out. The Roddy Piper, actually, like Roddy Piper and like Bret Hart, like they kind of survived. And Bret Hart was a bigger guy, like, but like you know, your normal looking guys that kind of he looked like, you know, like Eddie. I wouldn't say that he stood out as like this really like ripped guy, but like your normal looking guys like Bob Backlund and stuff like that, like. Actually, it's really funny that this follows up because, you know, when you got the superstar Billy Graham last episode, he kind of changed the landscape for all of wrestling. And guys like Eddie Gilbert kind of were starting to get filtered out because they weren't doing the roids and getting ripped and all this other stuff.
Yeah. And not saying that it's right, but this is the way the style was back then in the 1980s. I mean, you know, knowing what we know now, obviously steroids should have been made illegal a lot sooner than they were. But, you know, what can you do?
I don't agree that steroids should be illegal. I think that steroids should be definitely
monitored better, rather.
Monitored better. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because like if a guy wants to use steroids, that's fine. That's their own body they're wrecking. You know, because like this isn't a competitive sport. Like it isn't a like actual competitive sport where it's like, you know, like you're doing steroids. So it's like it's all about vanity. Like how big do you want to be? But look at CM Punk. Like CM Punk's, and granted, I know he's kind of been like insufferable in the past couple years, but like and Daniel Bryan, like those guys got over, and although they are like built, they aren't big guys like these other people are. So
no,
it's like,
I'll throw Seth Rollins in there. All of these guys, like they're good technicians, which is what Eddie Gilbert was. You know?
Yeah, but at this point, DOZ is right. Like at this point, those type of people were filtering out of wrestling at that point.
Yeah,
you know,
the barrel-chested type of guys.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, first-time watcher. Thank you very much, Sebastian Monroe. Going to stick around and see if you deserve my sub. Well, I'll do whatever you take, baby. Memphis, they do. Yes, we do. So, yeah, like I said, he kind of left the land of the giants because they were becoming jobber fodder. And he ended up in Memphis wrestling as a heel. And this is where he became and reinvents himself to Hot Stuff. I'm about to say Billy Graham. Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. Another comment here from Sebastian Monroe. I slipped a disc in my back in my first ever match. Steroids regulated are helping me recover. Instances like this, we should be the only time we use an industry like pro wrestling.
See, that I can understand. Yeah. That I can understand. But like, you know, it needed to be monitored better back in the 1980s and 90s, where it was like, okay, yeah, if you're going to take steroids, you could do that, but you can't be looking like an action figure. If you're looking like an action figure, something's going on with you.
Well, I mean, and I don't think you can really regulate that because, like, I mean, like but I agree with Sebastian where it's like. Yeah. It needed to be regulated in certain instances. Like steroids has I've taken steroids, not for the reason that all these other people were taking steroids, you know, but like I took steroids when I was super sick and I had to get better. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like steroids have their uses, and the illegality of the way that they were using steroids. That's what I'm talking about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's that abuse, and it's just like the abuse of the prescription drugs and everything like that. Like,
Yeah.
I agree. Anything done too much. I mean, because we've seen just generally, it doesn't have to be steroids. It's just drugs. Just generally, you do too much of it is a bad thing.
Yeah. Too much of one thing is never a good thing. But continue.
So he reinvented himself into Eddie Gilbert, a cocky heel. Hot stuff Eddie Gilbert, a cocky heel. You can see a lot of future talents when you look at Eddie Gilbert when he first comes in. Like I can see Mr. Perfect in him. I can see the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase in him, Flying Brian Pillman, HBK, like they're all in him. Like when you see him, the variations of him, even he himself is like taken from other elements himself, like a bit Jerry Lawler's in him, and you can see a bit of Nature Boy in him as well. But then at the same time, future iterations of what came out after him started with him, like HBK and Brian Pillman, and
he was
like
kind of.
So,
to an extent, not to get ahead, but he was kind of Brian Pillman before Brian Pillman started doing what he did. In the mid to late '90s with like breaking kayfabe and doing all the shit that he did. Because Pillman, a lot of people think Pillman was the first, but Pillman was not the first to do that kind of thing. Eddie Gilbert was.
Also, I live in New Zealand, so that the use of these things are way different over here. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so where am I here? Okay, so he was so good at being a heel, by the way. Even his grandmother hated him. So, considering her son, remember he's the grandmother. So I'm not sure if it's the grandmother on his mother's side or father's side. Regardless, like she doesn't realize what kayfabe is. Anyway,
I mean, my mom doesn't even like me, so I am the greatest heel of all time.
Brother,
Gilbert, right? That doesn't work for me, mother.
Anyway, Eddie became this is the interesting thing about Eddie. He wasn't just known as a wrestler; he was known as a booker, and he became a booker for Mid-South Wrestling, and created an angle with Cowboy Bill Watts. Back then, obviously, and it still is to a degree now. But my God, like the patriotism angles, they get used to death within wrestling.
Yeah,
and there's Eddie Gilbert, giving a Russian flag. I'll be honest with you, those same fucking hicknecks, if they were given a Russian flag now, they'll fucking take it with fucking pride. But back then, you get given a Russian flag and the communism, brother, and all of that sort of shit. No, they didn't want anything to do with it. Mm-hmm. And they're beating the shit out of Bill Watts and the Bolsheviks come in and stuff like that. The fans lost their fucking shit, and Eddie's magic was working.
Yes, we got a sub. Woo!
Oh, yay. Thank you. And, his name is not Zito, by the way. He's taking the piss out of me for some reason. But yeah.
Honestly, well, I know you're trying to do, but so what I did is I when I backspaced it to put Cheeto in, I didn't backspace a Z, and then I put ZCHEETO, and I'm like, yeah, fuck it. And I took the CH out, and I'm like, I'm Zito today.
Yep. It works.
So regarding his booking was excellent. He was also he also had excellent guidance as well, and people like Sting, Ultimate Warrior, who you could see as the Blade Runners back then. We had Rick Steiner as well, and Dr. Death, Steve Williams. They all came through his guidance. His booking style was amazing, but then unfortunately for him, Mid-South kind of got bought by Jim Crockett, and then soon after Turner, which became WCW. And a lot of people complain about the WWE buying all the territories, but WCW, they did the same as well to a degree. They bought a lot of territory to be.
It was more of a land race back then.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Vince McMahon definitely did some pretty I think Jim Crockett just kind of like bought things. Vince, I think, used more underhanded things.
Yeah, Vince would just be like, all right, I'm gonna buy you out or you get left behind. That was his philosophy.
Yeah, it definitely, yeah. And don't get me wrong, we're not promoting what they did, because I'm still a big fan. I'm more of a fan of the territories personally. But I think at the same time, it's almost inevitable that the monopolization of wrestling which is what happens in this world would have happened if it was Vince or somebody else.
I also think TV and cable kind of did that too, because like the reason why it was all territories is because you could go like to your local, like it was all within it was all within driving distance. But once stuff started doing TV and more TV time and live TV time, it was like as it was moving that direction, I think God hate Vince, but I mean he was pretty much a visionary when it came to like, I want to monopolize all this and we can go anywhere in the US and everyone can still watch. You know what I mean?
And they did. And then, like we said, like last week, you know, back then there was no internet, so you had to go in to buy your ticket. Like Ticketmaster wasn't a thing. You had to go to the town to buy tickets. Like, let's say if like Hulk Hogan was wrestling, you know, Paul Orndorff, and it was like in North Carolina, people in North Carolina and from all over had to go to North Carolina to get said tickets. That's how it was back then.
Yep, yeah, for sure. And so it was, yeah. And anyway, Eddie was now the book, but you know, even though Mid-South was bought by WCW via Jim Crockett, Eddie was still a booker for WCW. But
woo,
yep. Ric Flair comes in, he gets involved, and he wants to be the fucking booker.
Mm-hmm.
And now Ric Flair.
I love how the perception of Ric Flair has changed over the past 10 years. You know what I mean? Like 10 years ago, man, I feel like around 10 years ago, that guy, maybe even 5, that guy could do no wrong. He was a legend in place. Like everybody thought that he was all right. Like I knew he wasn't like the best or whatever.
I didn't. I didn't.
Well, okay.
I knew when he went to TNA, I was like, nope, fuck Ric Flair. That was the first thing I said. I was like, fuck you. You robbed Shawn Michaels in the WWE of the greatest send-off of all time, you bastard. And I've hated him ever since.
Well, yeah, there's that too.
Yep.
I mean, honestly, I hate it. There's other issues I hated him, which are far worse than that, but fair enough. Yep. So now Flair's calling the shots, and he wanted Eddie to lose to Ron Simmons.
Damn.
Eddie kind of changed. Yeah, Eddie changes the result, and Eddie won. Yeah, so because he didn't want to, you know, him because he was like, even though like these promotions were bought, they weren't fully monopolized yet. You know, that was still yet to happen, and so these territories were still there, but they were just under the umbrella of Turner. Mm-hmm. So Flair was telling him, okay, fine, whilst you're wrestling in Mid-South, we still want you to lose to Ron Simmons. And he goes, fuck that, I am Mid-South wrestling. I ain't gonna lose to Ron Simmons. I should win here.
And it was in Memphis, so that was the big thing. Like Eddie Gilbert wanted to be the king of Memphis because, you know, Jerry Lawler, he was the king, but Eddie Gilbert wanted that title for himself, and Ric Flair was like, no, you're not going to be the king of Memphis. So that was why Eddie Gilbert changed the finish, and yeah.
It's actually really nice to hear that, like, he was like, no, this is like my hometown, I want to win, rather than him being like, I ain't losing to no black man. Like, you know, like what would have happened back then? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, like,
what's more surprising is Ric Flair telling Eddie Gilbert to lose to a black man, because, you know, there's a lot of racism regarding Ric Flair back then. You know, so,
yep.
Was Ron Simmons a world champion, or like was he a former world champion at this point, or was this
not yet? That, right? Not yet. Yeah, he was about maybe like, let's see, if this was like, let's say maybe 87, 88. He was about maybe 4 or 5 years from winning the world title.
Okay. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I love Ron Simmons, but
same here. Yeah.
I think he got screwed out of a big pushes.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's continue, fellas. Flair was furious and got Eddie off the creative team, and then he got Jim Cornette onto the creative team. And this happened to be Eddie. If we remember, he was a childhood friend of Eddie Gilbert. Jim Cornette was, so this kind of pissed Eddie off. But his demotion and the heartbreak of what happened to him made him go back to Memphis wrestling, and he became a booker there. And he created an angle with Jerry Lawler back then, where he was supposed to almost run Lawler over, but he drove too fast.
He hit Lawler with his car. Yeah.
And this is the thing, because
this is the most famous thing about Eddie Gilbert that a lot of people know, is that he ran over Jerry Lawler.
And at the same time, like, this is the sort of stuff that keeps kayfabe alive.
Yep.
Like, yeah, but it was for real. It was an accident, but it was for real. And he actually hit him by driving too fast. And then next year, all the fucking marks are ringing up the cops, saying, I just witnessed a hit and run,
Yeah.
and Eddie Gilbert gets arrested, but Lawler had to tell the cops, "Look, this is a fucking work. I'm okay." But unfortunately, the marks in that part of the world,
They believed it
hillbilly
was
land,
real. They believed
yeah,
it was real. Yeah. And then
they believe that.
WCW didn't WCW do that? Like they had like Kevin Nash and Scott Hall beat up like Rey Mysterio and a bunch of guys and like
Well, they've done all
backstage, and
types
then
of
they
they've done all
yeah
types of stuff like that. But
yep
Yeah, but actually, I
back
think
then,
Jerry Lawler got hurt. Like, not
yeah
like obviously like severely like ran over hurt, but like he was definitely driving too fast, and and like it really rocked Jerry Lawler. I'm pretty sure because they had to escort, like they had to carry him in.
yeah he got
it,
banged up pretty good.
it is these moments where you think to yourself, "Thank God these guys are wrestlers." For him to be able to fall the way he did, even though it was on concrete and stuff like that, a regular person would have dropped like they would have hurt themselves a lot more.
Hmm.
But
Sack of potatoes.
regardless, these marks in hillbilly land, they got so carried away that after this incident, they were trying to kill Eddie Gilbert. Trying to stab him and slice him up and stuff like that. It was absolutely crazy. But even though this accident did happen, Eddie's talent as a booker was sought after from various other promotions, and he was jumping from territory to territory. But he's also starting to burn out as well, as you can imagine. It happens to the best of us. We all start to burn out. But but when going from all these territories, he first of all had a short relationship with Missy Hyatt. Was she ended up being the cat, Missy Hyatt? Is that
No,
her?
no,
Okay,
that's not her.
sorry, my bad. But their relationship only lasted a year and a half. But after that, he started a relationship with Medusa, which everyone knows Medusa. I mean, she's most famously putting the women's championship in the dustbin in WCW. That's like legendary,
Yep.
that particular moment. But still, he ended up having a very very long relationship with her. We see Medusa talking about her relationship with Eddie Gilbert, and we also see some family home video footage of the Gilbert family because she was involved with them. She spent Christmas with them, and we see them opening up presents and stuff like that. It was pretty cool.
I
Back
pop,
then.
I popped for the Game Boy. I was like, yeah, okay, good to see a Game Boy Color in there, man. Like, man, I miss that
Was
system.
it Game Boy Color? It looked like the
Yep,
old school one.
yep, that was the
Okay.
Game Boy Color in there. I was like,
God,
yeah.
that's
Not the
30
gray brick.
years.
Yeah, gray brick or nothing, man. That
Yep.
green screen and
I just miss Game Boy in general. Game Boy was the bomb, dude.
they got an emulator on Nintendo Switch, and it's not the same, but at the same time, it's like it works. I've played
Yeah,
it a little bit. Like it kind of gives you that like
yeah.
nostalgia. But anyway, continues in.
No problem. So Medusa mentions on one occasion that Eddie kind of fell asleep in his food, and I think Dutch Mantel, who was part of this as well, he also mentioned he saw that happen to Eddie when they were working, and at a dining table, and he fell asleep. And once again, this was kind of caused by the pills he was taking to handle his injuries. And as he's obviously now not a young man anymore, he's getting older. You can see like the effects that these things are having on him as
Hmm.
a wrestler. So we jump to Mick Foley, who talks about their matches and their feud. Said that on the independent circuit, they probably have one of the best feuds of all time. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
Seeing just some of the clips they went through, they were seriously hardcore and very bloody. I mean, that's just Mick Foley in a nutshell.
yeah. And like we said, in the beginning, back then with Memphis Wrestling, it was that territory of you had to bring it. And luckily for Mick, Mick was that guy, which is kind of unfortunate, where he was like, just so you know, I'm going to bring it to you, but you better bring it back to me. It's just unfortunate that we see Mick Foley the way he is now. But this is the price you pay for abusing your body all those years the way you did with that particular style.
And this is crazy that Gilbert, like he suffered a horrendous broken neck and heart issue, and he's doing these kinds of matches. Like it's crazy. It's crazy to think that he's still doing this stuff.
What's also crazy because it made me realize watching Mick Foley in this episode is that he didn't suffer the same sort of shit a lot of the other wrestlers went through. I don't know if there is, but there's no stories of Mick Foley being on medication and taking drugs the way other people. And if anybody would, it would be fucking Mick Foley.
It would be
considering
Mick.
what his body went through, but he hasn't gone down that road, which is crazy. I'm
The
sure.
fact that
Yeah.
Mick is still as sharp as a tack is the craziest thing out of all of this. Like, it's like for that guy to be in his 60s now, I believe, and still be as sharp as a tack, that is just,
I wouldn't say
wow.
I think he's talked about he's not as sharp as a tack anymore. He's starting to slip.
Okay, with his memory.
He said that his cognitive status has started to kind of slip. So
Oh,
I mean, I'm guessing like, yeah, he's 60. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you are absolutely correct that he is 1000% lucky that he is where he is. But even if he's slipping a little bit, it is a godsend that he is where he is now, based on all the chair shots, all the hardcore matches, all the brutality he's put his body through. And I mean, it's a cautionary tale to people, like not a cautionary tale, but like a tale.
No, you're right. You're right. It is a cautionary tale to an extent. Like,
well, I meant like, like people, like when everyone's like, oh, I can't take the pain. I got Mick Foley is not, like, as far as we know, Mick Foley is not like all hopped. I'm sure he takes some medication, but I'm sure it's all regulated and prescribed and actual legal.
Yep.
All these people that take all these pain meds that are unregulated and stuff, it's like, no, like if Mick Foley can do it the right way, so can you.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mick Foley just understands there's a cost to all of this, everything that he's done.
Yeah.
So we're getting into the 90s now, and the territories were disappearing, and then he joined a new promotion called Eastern Championship Wrestling, aka ECW, and they were in Philadelphia. And he brought the hardcore style which he had with Foley into ECW, being their booker. And all of a sudden, a young Paul Heyman comes along, also pretending to be a photographer. So, like for like there. And he learns a lot from Eddie Gilbert. And we see, and so we listen to some recorded footage from 2013, and mentions how Paul Heyman mentions how Eddie Gilbert was not only a great wrestler, but a tremendously good booker. I've never known bookers until I watched this episode to get such high regard. Like it's crazy. Like, he's more renowned for being a booker than he is being a wrestler, Eddie Gilbert. But he learned a lot. But unfortunately for Gilbert, though, because of the drugs, which seems to be an issue, join new territory, do the drugs, leave territory, join another one. But in this particular case, his drug persona kind of reared its head again, and that's when the issue started to turn up, started to pop up with Eddie Gilbert within ECW. Now, Paul wanted to take ECW nationally, but Eddie at the time kind of thought that by doing this, he was being kicked to the curb, and that's the paranoia of Eddie Gilbert there because of all the fucking drugs he's taking.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of left. He thought, "Fuck this! I'm going to leave before they have a chance to kick me off." So he leaves prematurely before like a pay-per-view event is supposed to happen. And this then means that in a promo on one of the last television shows of that particular period, the card was changed, and Eddie was no longer on it. But then he kind of sobers up. He says, "I want to come back." Apologizes. But what's his face? The guy who looks like Rufus from fucking Bill and Ted. He says, "Yeah, you can't come back. We've already changed the card. We're going ahead without you." So Eddie then says, "Okay, can I just come back to the show and just spend some time with you guys?" And they said yes. But what ended up happening was that Eddie comes back and tries to hijack the show, and runs onto the stage and cuts a fucking promo.
Well, I think they let him cut the promo. I would have done this as like a record, like with his unreliability.
A pre-tape.
Like
yeah.
I would have done a pre-tape thing. Like I'm sorry. Like
was it that because Paul Heyman says fucking cut the mic and all of that.
Well, I think because he was going on so long, that's why they cut the mic. He was going on and on and on. It was kind of like a Triple H Hall of Fame induction speech, like
or like a Dwayne Johnson promo.
Yeah,
right.
But he kind of hijacked it, and also this angered his brother as well. By the way, and his brother for some reason Doug Gilbert, that is, to honor his brother Eddie. He got a baseball bat and started smashing the shit out of some tables with some drinks on it and stuff like that. Kind of led to nowhere, really, but I think he was just expressing his anger as well for the sake of his brother being cut off the mic.
Yeah.
So with Eddie gone, Eastern Championship Wrestling became Extreme, and this is the legacy, though. Unfortunately, with Eddie, things kind of change every time he fucking leaves.
And here's the highlight of me, because I know what we're about to cover, the shoot interview thing. I'm surprised Cornette didn't blow a gasket over this, because you know how Cornette is. These damn kids breaking kayfabe. You know.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I will get to that, but I do love Jim Cornette. But the fact that he has such an issue over this, when everybody fucking knows now, is quite. I do think some things get overly exposed. I agree with that. You know, like we've got this.
I don't think he's angry about it anymore, is he? I think he's more. He was more just saying back then, like in the 90s, like you didn't talk about the behind the scenes.
No,
nowadays, they're doing whole television shows about it.
Yeah, WWE decided, fuck kayfabe, we're gonna have a writers' room show, which is like, okay, you just revealed that Oz is just the man that talks into the microphone. Why should we watch this shit now?
I mean, I still think people will watch just because of the compelling. Like, you know, we invest in some of these wrestlers, and the more that their real personalities bleed into their characters rather than being a kayfabe character,
you believe it.
And you kind of invest yourself in it. You know what I mean? Like, wrestling is less kayfabe than a TV show nowadays. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, So I'm all for it. As I said, I mean, I agree with Zam, though, in the fact where it's like sometimes they pull the curtain back a little too much, where it's like, when you got John Cena walking around saying, I'm a face and I'm a heel. And it's like, okay, we get it. Like,
like John Cena, like being a heel on TV, and then he'll join the Pat McAfee show and he's acting all face like seriously, dude, like, you know, you're not doing your heel turn any favors.
Nope.
Like, don't poo-poo here. Oh, you silly girl. She poo-pooed on one. There it is. Jesus Christ. I'll clean that up in a sec. Yeah. Anyway, let's get back to the thing. So, Eddie wanted to kind of tell his side of the story, and he did the first ever shoot interview. It was initially frowned upon, but it set a precedent, and wrestlers then soon followed suit. Jim Cornette tried to bury the hatchet with Eddie and have Eddie work with him, and then have his mind as well work with him on Smoky Mountain. But after one TV taping, Eddie went to Puerto Rico to basically work in the last territory he would ever be working for, and he would be also a booker there as well. So it's a bit weird with Eddie. Like, he's all over the place. I mean, you talk about a journeyman in the industry. Eddie Gilbert is the ultimate fucking journeyman, man. Mm-hmm. I mean, he worked for anybody and everybody he could fucking work for.
You could also probably throw Abdullah. You could probably also throw Abdullah the Butcher in that category, because Abdullah, he was the same way, where he never stayed in the territory way too long, and he wrestled for like 50 years.
Yeah, but it also kind of shows you that these guys, like they I mean, at one particular point, you know, going from territory to territory, there was a meaning behind it. But once the territory started to get all bought up, you know, if you're jumping from whatever's left to whatever's left, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're helping another territory survive. It just means that you're fucking being fired and you're useless, or you're shit, or you're a liability, and that's why you're going to another territory. But anyway, he ended up in Puerto Rico. So weeks later, on February the 18th, 1995, Eddie Gilbert was found dead. He was in his 30s, and some of the people, ironically, blamed his time in Puerto Rico for his death, saying that drug abuse, saying you can get whatever drug you wanted. But the reality is, he'd been abusing drugs for years.
Yep.
For a long time.
And your body can only take so much of that shit before your heart ultimately just taps out and says, okay, I'm out.
I mean, that's Eddie Guerrero. I mean, Eddie Guerrero might have been clean when he died, but he put his heart and his, all in his cardio through all of that, like all the steroids and drugs and stuff. Like, I mean,
you mix all of that up, the constant drug abuse, the severe accidents he's gone through with his neck and his heart, the
Yep.
constant bumps he's also still taking in the ring, and it becomes a vicious cycle of wrestling and drugs and wrestling and drugs. It all caught up with him.
Yeah.
And then he became, like this line of wrestlers who would die in their 30s.
Yeah, he was. I think because I know a lot of people like to bring up Pillman as the first, because like Pillman was kind of the first to like truly die and get that like snowball rolling. Because then we lost Owen, and then we lost Hawk and Miss Elizabeth and all
Did
these
Pillman
other
die
people.
in 95? I think he died.
Pillman
after
died in
95.
Pillman died in 97. But my point is, Eddie Gilbert kind of started that snowball effect, if that makes sense. Yeah, which is unfortunate.
It was really it was a really sad time. Ricky Morton, who I'm only bringing up now, but he's one half of the Rock and Roll Express, says quite beautifully that wrestlers, when they're in the ring, it's like being on Broadway.
Yep.
And I agree. I've always said like wrestling is live action theater, and it is, and his brother Doug also added that Eddie did what he did, and he did it to the very last day of his life, performing for people, booking wrestling. This is what he loved to do the most, and the guy was born into it. As I said earlier, his dad was a wrestler. He was a wrestler.
Yep.
So it was in his blood. So to basically summarize this episode of Dark Side of the Ring, Eddie was an enigma to me personally. I had no idea about this guy existing. If prior to this episode, if somebody told me who Eddie Gilbert was, I wouldn't have a fucking clue. I knew who his associates, but I didn't know him.
Yeah.
His time in the ring and being a booker had enough of an influence in wrestling that we still see that influence today. Unfortunately, like many wrestlers that have come before and after him, drugs and serious life-changing injuries took their toll, and then took their toll on his life. Eddie Gilbert, rest in peace. Eddie Gilbert died on February the 18th, 1995. He was found dead with headphones, apparently.
Yeah, while listening to music. That's a crazy way to go.
Feather? Thank God, that's a feather. Yeah, whilst listening to music, but I guess I guess it's a good way to go, considering the way people have gone in the past.
I mean, that's how I'm going to go. They're going to come in and find me laying back in my chair with earbuds and listening to NerdTube broadcasts. So
that's how I would like to go as well. So before we wrap things up, let's summarize. Overall, Jose, what would you like to give this episode?
I'm going to go ahead and give it an 8. Like I said, I don't really see it more as a Dark Side episode rather than like a Rise and Fall episode, because that's what you got. You got the rise of Eddie Gilbert, you got the fall of Eddie Gilbert, and then you got the demise of Eddie Gilbert. But overall, I'm going to give it a 7. I thought it was a really good episode.
You went from an 8 to a 7.
Or, yeah, Steiner math. I got a 141.
Steiner math.
Yeah, I got a 141 2/3% chance of winning, pal. But I'm gonna stick with my 8. Actually, yeah, I'll stick with my 8.
Okay, fair enough. Cheats.
I'm gonna give it a 6 just because it didn't blow me away. It was kind of a, I felt like this was just kind of a thrown in one. I mean, I don't feel like the guy was really that pivotal. Again, I appreciate the little nuggets that they're teaching us, so that's why I'm giving it above. Like, I don't feel like that this this is a docu episode. Rise and fall type thing. Like, but it's not like it was like anything super crazy. So,
before you go, Zam, I was going to say, speaking of crazy, next week is going to be Billy Jack Hayes. That's going to be a crazy episode.
Is he still alive, Billy Jack Hayes?
Nope. He died. He passed away. Yeah, but he's going to be next week's episode.
Okay. I'm going to give this episode a 7. It's a very familiar vibe from this episode as well. But it was interesting to see the particular wrestler. He was innovative to a degree. As I said earlier, there are wrestling characters we see today that have emerged from Billy Gilbert, the same way as wrestlers have emerged from people like superstar Billy Graham, and the fact that he was a renowned booker more than being a wrestler is also a testament to him. I heard in earlier on that apparently this guy burnt a lot of bridges, maybe that was due to drug use and stuff like that. So those are the sort of elements of this episode that I wish we got more of. Like those dark side moments. Yes, I get it. He does drugs. Which wrestler fucking doesn't? But like the sort of rivalries and animosity he had with different people in real life, I would want a bit more of that. But yeah, it gets a 7. Nevertheless, I did have a good time. Anything to add before we wrap up, fellas?
Nope. I think we're good.
Besides your lag, do you see that, DH?
You're lagging. Yeah, he's lagging.
That's all right.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it's all right. Just wrap it. Just let's go. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yep.
Don't forget to like, share, subscribe to Nerdtude, the great social media network you never heard. Billy Jack Hayes is next week, so watch us for that.
Yep.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Yeet.